right. Put this a little closer. Can you hear me okay in the back? Okay, great, thank you. All right. Well, in the text, we finally got to bodhicitta. If you read in advance, you'll see we got to that part, mind of enlightenment, what that exactly is. So as to your homework for the next class, it's also the meditation on bodhicitta. Okay. And that's a good way to start your day anyway. So I'll say a little bit about bodhicitta today, and then based on that, or based on whatever else you've learned about bodhicitta, please do the meditation. You also had another homework, but I can't remember what it was. There was a question that came. All right, okay, great. Okay, so again, for those who didn't hear me say that, your homework is meditating on bodhicitta, and we'll discuss bodhicitta today. Your homework, okay, now I know your homework, great, about the trailblazer, but we'll discuss it a little later. Okay, so in order to generate the right kind of motivation, the most beneficial motivation that helps us to gain a better understanding of what we're going to learn about emptiness and so forth, let's remember again the different steps. Of course, the importance of other sentient beings in so many different ways, in terms of our past experiences, thinking of the closest person in this lifetime. Everyone has been that close or even closer to us, endless lifetimes. We just don't recognize them. And then secondly, they are just like us. What we have in common, or no, what our differences are outweighed by what we have in common. There's very deep drive, this very deep urge or deep wish, just be happy, to not have problems, to find satisfaction. And of course, without other sentient beings, we couldn't do anything. We wouldn't be who we are today. We wouldn't have the Dharma, we couldn't develop our mind, we couldn't even stand up and walk and talk. So everything is because of other sentient beings, and again, other sentient beings supporting the sentient beings who directly benefit us. In that way, the importance of others cannot be underestimated, cannot be stressed enough. So in that sense, therefore, first we generate a sense of closeness, seeing that sentient beings are a part of us, other sentient beings are actually just a part of us. Secondly, just as we feel we deserve to be loved, we want to be loved, we want to be accepted for who we are, well, so do other sentient beings deserve to be loved, deserve to be accepted for who they are. And of course, their main problem is just as the main problem, that's our main problem as well, is that they have endless unwanted experiences in the form of dukkha, in the form of suffering, unsatisfactory experiences. We want to get rid of them. The moment they arise, we just want to get rid of them. So do other sentient beings, and just as we deserve to be free from them, so do they deserve to be free from them, which is the reason for why great compassion makes so much sense. The wish for all sentient beings to be free from any type of dissatisfactory experience, and even more so, any type of limitation, any type of fault. And from there, that wish for all sentient beings to be free from dukkha, from suffering, and the wish combined with that, the wish for us to be able to protect all sentient beings from dukkha, being great compassion, and that package of these two aspects, that then grows stronger and turns into the altruistic attitude. Be determined, no matter what, we'll give our very best to work for the benefit of all sentient beings. And what is the most effective way? Generating the mind of enlightenment. Okay, so that's just a logical consequence. So the why is the benefit of sentient beings. How is through enlightenment. All right, so let's reflect on that just briefly, what I talked about just now. Taking a few moments, just watching the breath. And then remember that all sentient beings are part of us. An important part, whether from a worldly point of view or a spiritual point of view. Who deserve to be loved, who deserve to be accepted, and who deserve to be cared for. The same way we care for ourselves. Just like us, they're caught in the ocean or swamp of samsara. Endlessly creating causes for future problems, future sufferings. We have found a path showing us how to remove the root of suffering. So let's therefore generate great compassion by thinking, may all sentient beings be free from any dissatisfactory state. And may I be able to help them. And reaching freedom from that dissatisfaction. This aspiration then gives way to the altruistic attitude that is now determined to do whatever we can to help sentient beings overcome all their dukkha, all their faults and limitations. Since realistically, we can only accomplish this once we actualize our fullest potential in the form of Buddhahood. Let's generate the mind of enlightenment, the aspiration or even determination attain the state of a Buddha for the benefit of each and every sentient being. holding on to this mind of enlightenment, let's recite the prayers together. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merits of listening to the teachings, may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merits of listening to the teachings, may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merits of listening to the teachings, may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment and anger that holds some close and others distant. All right. Just to remind those of you online, we're actually no longer taking questions from the, what's it called, the YouTube discussion group or something. YouTube, I think it's called YouTube discussion, because it requires someone. I mean, today Katja has kindly agreed to still check the YouTube group. There's no live chat. Oh, live chat. There's no live chat. Oh, it's switched off. Oh.
Comment maybe afterwards.
Ah, so they comment afterwards. Yeah. Anyway, so please don't use the live chat. In other words, also not after class. And just if you could join the discussion group, if possible. And if you don't want to join a WhatsApp group, then send an email. Yeah, that's a problem. What to do? It's difficult to communicate. Well, we had the discussion last time about the trailblazers, the pioneers. Remember, I spoke about Nagarjuna and Asanga. After the Buddha, of course, taught the Chittamatra and the Madhyamika schools, which accept that not all the teachings of the Buddha can be taken literally, they have to be interpreted. Different to the Vaibhashika and the Sautrantika, so that distinction doesn't exist in the two lower philosophical systems, Vaibhashika and Sautrantika. But in the Chittamatra and Madhyamika, you definitely have the discussion of those who established these two philosophical schools by way of clearly establishing which teachings of the Buddha can be taken literally and which ones cannot, from the point of view of Chittamatra and from the point of view of Madhyamika. And so you have Asanga, the Chittamatra trailblazer, and Nagarjuna, the Madhyamika trailblazer. And then you have Chandakirti, who is called not a Madhyamika trailblazer, but a Prasangika trailblazer, because he clearly laid out basically which teachings of the Buddha can be taken literally, which ones cannot, but also by way of showing this is the Svatantrika system, this is what we don't accept, we refute the Svatantrika school. This is the Prasangika, that's the school we accept. So very clearly delineating this particular philosophical school. So despite being a Prasangika trailblazer, he's not described as a trailblazer in general. He's not even the Madhyamika trailblazer, and he's not a trailblazer, in general. Why is that, Aiden? You just raised your hand.
My first question would be, why are they, who gave them the name trailblazers?
Pardon?
Who gave them the name trailblazers?
Who gave them the name trailblazer? Well, I guess the Buddha himself, when he prophesied, like he made these prophecies, he predicted their coming. I guess in a way, actually the Buddha himself called them that. But I don't think just because the Buddha called Nagarjuna and Asanga a trailblazer, he forgot to say Chandrakirti. No, I shouldn't say forgot, but he didn't mention Chandrakirti that is the reason. There's a logical reason. There's a logical reason for why Nagarjuna is called a Madhyamika trailblazer and Asanga is called a Chittamatra trailblazer, but that same title is not extended to Chandrakirti. But he's called the Prasangika trailblazer.
So the logical reason is the trail's already been blazed.
That's it. The trail has already been blazed. The logical reason is, yeah. So to be a trailblazer, it can only be one of the two, Madhyamika or Chittamatra. And Nagarjuna already blazed the trail. I mean, he's a Prasangika trailblazer, but he's not a Madhyamika trailblazer, he's not a Chittamatra either, and these are the two possibilities. And those both of them have already been blazed. Those two trails have been blazed. Therefore, yes, he is the Prasangika trailblazer. Bhava Viveka is the Svatantrika trailblazer, but none of these two masters, Nalanda masters, are called trailblazers. Okay. All right, that's it. Very good.
Magician, actually, my question was last time,
Yes.
what makes them Arya and what makes them Acharya? And who?
Oh, what makes them? Oh, I didn't say that. That was an answer to. That was not an answer to your question. What makes them Aryas and what makes them Acharyas? I mean, Acharya. That's the translation of Lobön in Tibetan. That's usually given like a title of a learned person, a learned master. So it's kind of a title. I mean, there's actually, just like you have the Geshe title or the Kempo title, in some traditions you have the Acharya title that's given, for instance, at Varanasi, at the university in Varanasi. But besides that, it's also used as a title of, like an honorific title. So of a learned person, a learned scholar, in particular in the Buddhist field. So Lobön, so like a bumbo, like a leading person in among those who are learned. Maybe translate. I mean, that would be using the Tibetan syllables. An Arya, Pakpa in Tibetan, an Arya person is someone who's realized emptiness directly.
So my question again, so where I'm drawing into, why Chandrakirti is not an Arya?
Why is Chandrakirti? Oh, well, Chandrakirti is an Arya.
Then why we are calling him Acharya Chandrakirti?
Well, you see, the thing is, why do we call him? I mean, we can call him Arya Chandrakirti. Because a lot of people refer to him as Acharya, so I did the same. In fact, it's quite interesting that some of the honorifics, there are quite a few. There's, for instance, protector. There are words like Arya. There's Acharya. They're referred to. There's the glorious, the one who possesses glory. They're used for different people. It's kind of like established itself in that way. I'm not sure there's a particular reason. It's not like saying you can't call Nagarjuna. Usually Nagarjuna is referred to as the protector. Gumbu, the protector. Chandrakirti is described as the Pandin Dawatawa. Pandin means like the glorious, the one who possesses glory. Pandin Dawatawa. Yeah, so in that way, but in English it sounds so weird, the glorious Chandrakirti. So I just went along with Acharya. Arya Nagarjuna, you also sometimes call Nagarjuna Arya. So there's no particular reason, I think. I mean, you don't call them Aryas unless they've realized emptiness directly, or at least it has been recorded, it has been described that they have realized emptiness directly. Sometimes it's said they're on this level in the texts, and based on that, we know they must have realized emptiness directly. All right, great. Yeah, I hope I answered your question in that way. I don't even know how we got to your question, to the whole trailblazer thing. I wasn't trying to answer your question, no. I forgot actually to answer it, so I'm glad you brought it up again. But where did we get to in the text? How Buddhas are born from bodhisattvas. Finally, we're discussing, well, bodhicitta, great compassion. Bodhicitta actually is more, it's the main concept we discussed today. Okay. We had the discussion also, I really like how people discuss this in class here. It's very nice. I looked through it after class last time. When there's too much during class, I can't read all of it. But I did later on, and yeah, there's discussion between Banu and Mikael Jamba. I think Mikael, I hope I pronounce it right. Yeah, so about the Pratyeka Buddha, we started off with the Pratyeka Buddha, discussed that, and the Pratyeka Buddha not attaining enlightenment or attaining nirvana in the very life when they receive teachings by a Buddha, but in some later life, because that's their aspiration to attain enlightenment, I keep saying enlightenment, although in Tibetan they use that word sometimes for nirvana. So to attain nirvana in the next life, because that's the aspiration, to figure it out themselves. Yeah, receive some teachings in the beginning, but then to come to their own understanding in a later life and be more solitary, be practicing, being a solitary practitioner. Anyway, this is also supported by the fact that they are able to engage in prolonged practice, whereas hearers are not able to do that, to engage in this prolonged practice. It would be too overwhelming for them. Therefore, they receive teachings, they teach others as well. They're much more social in their interactions with others, and relatively quickly attain the state of an arhat. And so we talked about why does the solitary realizer take longer? Well, in a way, I guess it's good they're still around when there's no longer Buddhist teachings, when there are no longer bodhisattvas and Buddhas, when people don't have the karma to have them around. Then you have these solitary realizers that can still maybe be an inspiration. I mean, when we say Buddhism is no longer around, it means like as a mainstream religion. Could still be that there are practitioners. But anyway, there are these times when there's no Buddhist teachings available in the same way as it's available today, nowadays, for instance. And then it's good to have these solitary realizers hanging out, being there. But anyway, I'm not sure about the exact reason. I wanted to research it and I forgot, but I'll get back to you about that. But the discussion we had was actually, can a solitary realizer enter a bodhisattva path? And the answer is yes. Or a hearer can enter the bodhisattva path before attaining their respective liberation, self-liberation. But it's only at an early stage when they're not that determined yet. So on the path of the small path of accumulation. Usually that's when they're not that strong yet, right? Or it could possibly be at a later stage as well. But anyway, the point being, it is possible, but I don't think it's typical. I think usually they're very determined. But there's also a word in Tibetan that describes a hearer or a solitary realizer. We used that word before, like having the spiritual disposition, the zik. I don't like the word lineage, having the hearer lineage or the Pratyeka Buddha lineage for the reason I gave before. Lineage means much more like a transmission, like receiving teachings as an unbroken transmission. Whereas here it's more like an inclination, a disposition, a predisposition, a spiritual predispositions. Spiritual predisposition or spiritual disposition. And some of us may have that. I've definitely met practitioners who felt very close to the Theravada tradition, the Tibetan tradition. It just didn't appeal to them in any way. Just had a different karmic connection, and the Theravada way was what they felt comfortable with, what they felt determined to practice. But there is a term that describes exactly that, someone having this kind of inclination, but you use the word definitely, ringe, ngeba. So it's someone who definitely follows the hearer inclination or has a definite hearer inclination. And sometimes the word is not used. You have it for a time being, temporarily, there is that, but then it switches and you develop the bodhisattva inclination. Anyway, in here, I think in this text, we're talking about those who are definite in their inclination. So what Lama Tsongkhapa, we just discussed it at the side. It is possible that hearers and solitary realizer enter a bodhisattva path before becoming self-liberated. But here in this case, they're discussing the definite hearer-inclined person, or person inclined to practice the hearer path or the solitary realizer path. Okay. Anyway, having said that, just as part of the last discussion, now the question is, how are Buddhas born from bodhisattvas? Oh no, we did that, sorry. We did that. The three principal causes of bodhisattvas. Sorry, I made a mistake. So that would be, in your text, it would be either on page 57, 58, 57 probably, or 42, depending on what text you have. The hard copy or the PDF, or if you follow the Kindle version, it's page 52. Okay, so the three principles that we've heard, Pratyeka Buddhas and hearers, they are the product, or they have arisen from Buddhas. Buddhas have arisen from bodhisattvas. In other words, every Buddha is the result of previously having been a bodhisattva. Now, where does a bodhisattva come from? And that's most important. Okay. And it says the compassionate mind and non-dual cognition, as well as the awakening mind. These are causes of bodhisattvas. These are the causes. I mean, it says these are causes of bodhisattvas, but they're actually the primary causes of bodhisattvas. That's Chandrakirti's verse. And then Lama Tsongkhapa explains the meaning of, no, it's not a verse, it's just 2 lines of the first verse, the last 2 lines of the first verse. Lama Tsongkhapa says, now, if Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas are born from sovereign sages, or born from Buddhas, and the sages, these Buddhas, are born from bodhisattvas, what then are the causes of these bodhisattvas? Okay. The compassionate mind, which will be explained below, that's one of them. So compassion. The compassionate mind, Ninje Sem in Tibetan. So it's a literal translation. Ninje Sem. Compassion, mind, compassionate mind. Instead of just saying compassion, it doesn't mean that this is not a mental factor just because you use the word mind. Because mind, we distinguish between mind and mental factors, but only when you distinguish between mind and mental factors does mind mean main mind. But in general, mind, consciousness, awareness, they're equivalent. Okay. Anyway, so the compassionate mind, a mental factor called compassion, or great compassion actually here, will be explained a little later. Then the wisdom or cognition. Actually, cognition, it literally says in Tibetan law. In Tibetan the word is law. Law means awareness. It's usually translated as awareness. But there's no problem translating it as cognition here. So the wisdom or cognition that realizes the non-dual truth of freedom from the dichotomy of extremes of thingness and no-thingness. It's literally, it does say that in Tibetan. It uses a vocabulary that's a little unusual, like the thing and the no-thingness. Thing and thing, no-thingness. That's interesting. What does thingness mean? Dichotomy of the extremes. It already gives it away. 2 extremes. Thingness and no-thingness. All right. What is thingness?
Manifest, non-manifest.
Pardon?
Manifested, non-manifested.
Manifested, non-manifested. Well, it's the wisdom that realizes emptiness, right? It's the wisdom here. It's that wisdom, the non-dual cognition refers to wisdom, realizing emptiness, and there are 2 extremes. So what are the 2 extremes? Reification, which refers to inherent existence. Okay. And then the other extreme is nihilism. The other extreme. So the 2 extremes, one is the extreme that everything exists inherently in and of themselves, in and of itself, versus it doesn't exist at all. Those are the 2 extremes. Now, mind that realizes emptiness is obviously free from the two extremes. That's why emptiness is also described as the middle way, free from two extremes, reification and nihilism. Reification is called thingness here. Thingness. What is it about this thingness?
What is the eternalism?
Pardon?
The eternalism or thingness.
Say again?
Eternalism. It's not like
Eternalism. Yes, yes. But why do they use the word thingness? Thing. I don't know, something came to mind. I mean, I'm not sure this is correct. But when we perceive things, when they appear to our mind, first of all, and also then when we apprehend them, when we actively apprehend, we actively think about them, they always appear to be very concrete, a concrete thing. It's this as opposed to everything else, right? So it's like this objective thing over there, like a table. And in a sense, there's this thing that is a table, and I call it a table because it is that thing table. I call it that because it is that. Instead of, it is that because I call it that. Right? I label it, I designate it table because it is a table. That's how it feels. It's got that thingness from its own side. It's got that entered, like this thing of like being concrete, this object as opposed to anything that is not it. That comes to mind when I hear like thingness. But it's just not a word you use in everyday language, so it's hard to get there. But yeah, this very concrete kind of entity. And no thingness would be like, well, conventionally it's nothing. It doesn't even exist conventionally. That thing, it's not even in a conventional way a thing, which would be the extreme of nihilism. Does that make sense? But like I said, it's not a term that is used a lot, like even in Tibetan, to describe the two extremes here, thingness and no thingness. No, usually it's the extreme of eternalism or reification or permanence. Okay, and as opposed to nihilism. Anyway, so we've already discussed that. So the extreme of reification, and it says non-dual, non-dual. That's a difficult concept, a dualistic mind versus a non-dualistic mind. But although it mentions non-dual, later on we hear it doesn't mean non-dual in the ordinary sense, in the sense philosophically how we usually use the word. It means actually it's a non-dual mind in the sense it's free from the two extremes. That's what it means. A dual mind usually means something different. So you have the subject-object duality. You remember? We studied that before. Some of you, I'm looking at Aiden. Do you remember what dualism, what kind of dualism is usually described when we talk about the mind realizing emptiness? Like a direct perceiver of emptiness. In what way is it non-dual? And this is the different kind of meaning of duality as in here.
Nothing appears.
Pardon?
Because nothing appears.
Nothing appears. Nothing.
You realize emptiness.
Oh yeah. So emptiness doesn't appear?
Depends what school you're in, of course.
Oh, okay. All right.
conceptual thinking.
All right. So, but emptiness, okay, in according school, you mean like Prasangika or Svatantrika?
Like Kali versus Lamasamkhapa.
Ah, okay. So let's stick with Lamasamkhapa here because I don't know the other schools when they say nothing. Okay. So do you think, all right, emptiness, right? Emptiness would appear. Yeah, okay. So the lack of inherent existence would appear. But other than that, nothing appears. Yeah, absolutely. And what did you say? It's free from conceptuality. Yeah, that's also true in that sense. But subject-object duality, remember that? Subject-object duality, remember what that referred to? A mind that is totally absorbed into emptiness. I give you a hint, water.
Witness.
Witness.
Like water into water.
Pouring water into water. In the sense that to that mind, there's no sense, this is the perception, this is the object. This distance. Like usually when we look at an object, there's a sense, I perceive this object and the object is over there. Right? We have that sense of like a subject-object duality in that sense. Perceiver, perceived object. But when you realize emptiness directly, that disappears. Your mind is so absorbed into emptiness, that distance between the mind and its object is gone. I think we have maybe similar states, that they're not really absorptions, and that subject-object duality is definitely there, but not to the same degree, when we're like totally absorbed in something. And we don't even know how time passes. We have no sense of I in that moment, no sense of how we're just totally absorbed. It's not 100% absorbed, but in comparison to our everyday perceptions other than that, we're totally absorbed, right? Yes.
You said at that point there is no object, it just feels like it.
There is an object and there is a subject, but to that mind, that disappears. So I'm not saying this is a wrong consciousness, therefore, but it's just from the perspective of that mind, there is no sense of object and subject. Yeah. But ordinarily, we do have a sense of that. So they just merge. Like they don't literally merge, but it seems to that mind. Or later on, it's much better to then say later on, when they arise from that absorption, they remember just emptiness and nothing else, right? There's nothing else they remember, or whatever, yeah, lack of inherent existence and nothing else. What is it, Aine? Okay.
Empty is not like the interesting things you remember.
No, empty is not like the interesting things that you remember. That's true, but just that like both are objects of the mind. Both are taken to mind. So in that sense, there's a different way to look back at your absorption. Like your mind, it was just emptiness. There's no sense of perceiving it whatsoever. And then with regard to other objects, interesting or not, there is a sense of that perception.
You should have a clarification to make is somebody who is realizing this non-dual emptiness.
Yes.
Should in the mind there will be no non-affirming negative, and it should be free of both non-affirming and affirming.
So a mind that realizes emptiness directly, are they free from affirming and non-affirming negatives? I mean, emptiness itself is a non-affirming negative. It just happens to be a non-affirming negative. But to that mind, it doesn't appear such. Yeah, so a non-affirming negative, as such, is a conventional truth, but to that mind, no conventional truth appears. If a non-affirming, if, for instance, the mind were to think, oh, emptiness is a non-affirming negative, that's not emptiness, and so something other than emptiness will appear to it. Therefore, it would no longer be a non-dual mind.
Another clarification to make, like, suppose somebody is realizing emptiness.
Those are not clarifications. All right, let's address them later if that's okay with you. Right? They're not like clarification would be if something I've said is not really clear. But please keep your other question for the question answer. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. All right. Anyway, so thingness and non-thingness here, it refers to the mind, like the mind free from the extremes. And then you also have the awakening mind. The awakening mind. That's a nice word, actually. Mind generation. You remember we used that in the past, especially when we studied Parchin. Mind generation. But awakening mind is a really nice word. It's in Tibetan you have semkye. Let me just quickly check. Semkye. Semkye. So sem means mind, and kye means actually generating or producing. It's a transitive verb, as opposed to the intransitive version, which is being produced, being generated. Okay. Just quickly, I want to make sure. No, it doesn't say awakening mind. It says actually the mind of enlightenment. Or does it? Just a sec. Yeah, anyway, never mind. Awakening mind could, yes.
Please repeat compassionate mind in Tibetan.
What is the connotation in the Tibetan?
No, you said term in Tibetan.
The term semkye.
No, compassionate term.
Ani ninje sem. Ninje means compassion. Sem means mind. Ninje, so the mind of compassion or the compassionate mind. Yeah. Yeah, so the awakening mind, having realized the suchness, this is this quote. Chanchu Sem, yeah. Never mind. Sem Kankyo, yeah. It does use Chanchu Sem. There are actually two words in Tibetan. One is literally the mind of enlightenment. Chanchu Sem. Chanchu means enlightenment. Sem means mind. So mind of enlightenment, which is an interesting word actually. Mind of enlightenment. Either you explain this to mean the mind that aspires to enlightenment, or you give the name of the result to the cause. Mind of enlightenment. It's like saying Buddha nature. Right? We have the nature of a Buddha, but we're not Buddhas yet. Therefore, giving the name of the result to the cause. Buddha potential, therefore. We have the potential to become Buddhas. Okay. That's one word, Chanchu Sem. The other word is Semke. Semke, I think awakening mind is a nice translation. Like the mind that is being generated. So I guess, again, once you're Buddha, you have an awakened mind. Now it's an awakening mind. That's a nice translation, I think. Anyway, okay. So the primary causes, therefore, of a bodhisattva are those three. Compassion, wisdom realizing emptiness, and bodhicitta. The commentary, the Arthur commentary, states a particular sutra. So the sutra that is given here, and I told you last time I will talk a little bit about some of the sutras themselves to inspire us to read the sutras more, except this one hasn't been translated to English yet. So the previous one, the Kashyapa discourse, that was translated, for instance. The Kashyapa discourse, remember the discourse to Kashyapa? I mentioned that sutra before. That has been translated. There are two English translations apparently, but the later translation, I think, is the one that is I would recommend. Let me just look up the person who translated it. It's actually a Theravada monk from Germany, I found out. Oh, what's his name? He was born in 1939, became a monk in 1960, and is one of the earliest Western monks in Southeast Asia, the Theravada tradition. I don't know, what's his name? Bhikkhu Pasadika. Bhikkhu Pasadika, his name is. Anyway, he translated it in 2016, so he's still quite active, like translating. He's over 80, 85, yeah. Anyway, that has been translated by him. It was published, yeah. What's it called? The Kashyapa Parivarta. It's called the Kashyapa Parivarta, yeah. Published by Aditya Prakashan in New Delhi in 2015, or not 2016. All right, so if you're interested in this particular sutra, and here, this is a quote given from a sutra called the Dharma Samgiti Sutra, in Tibetan Chuyandaba Dubudo, which literally means, well, Geshe Tunjima translates it as perfectly gathering the teaching sutra, or the perfectly gathering the Dharma Sutra, the sutra of perfectly gathering the Dharma. And it very much emphasizes the development of great compassion. It's beautiful. It's all about great compassion. So, for instance, it talks about, it says, for instance, if bodhisattvas grasp and know great compassion, they will have all the teachings of the Buddha in the palm of their hand. Isn't that beautiful? So that's one way in which this text talks about compassion is really everything. We discussed this before, how actually of the two, great compassion and bodhicitta, great compassion is more important and more difficult. Actually, in a way, it's more difficult. I mean, bodhicitta is also difficult, of course, but we're so used to having the focus on ourselves. Compassion is really having the focus on all other sentient beings. So moving the focus away, my happiness, my well-being, changing the focus on now all other sentient beings, like the self-centered attitude. And before we can generate great compassion, we even have to have renunciation. Because great compassion doesn't just want sentient beings to be free from the suffering we want to be free from, right? I mean, I don't want to experience hot and heat and cold and being hungry, etc. I mean, that's the kind of suffering that I usually want to be free from. But do I worry about the suffering of samsara? No, I love the suffering of samsara. I'm attached to the suffering of samsara, which is why I first need to understand what's wrong with cyclic existence, how I'm trapped in this existence, how I'm, is that the right word, shortchanging myself? I mean, I'm sacrificing my long-term happiness for something so minor. It's so ridiculous. The little bit of satisfaction that I get in samsara, I'm therefore unable to experience true lasting happiness. I think I also used this analysis before. No one is saying it's not happiness, actually, like what we experience. Conventionally, it is happiness. But in comparison to the happiness we can experience, it's deep suffering. Usually I give the analogy, remember Aiden, the analogy you give with the temperature? Right? The temperature. So I use the temperature. I say, for instance, let's say you live in Germany before climate change. And so, you know, like in the winter, it's really cold, -10, -20 degree. And then in spring, when slowly the temperature goes up and it's +10, it's like, whoa, it's so warm, get out, t-shirts out. It feels so warm. And even 20 degrees is like, wow, people are sweating after those -20 degrees. But if you then take someone from Bombay, or no, so where is it hottest? In Beer, right? Like Beer, that area, or Rajasthan gets really hot. And they come to Germany, like it's 20 degrees. Oh my God, they'll be like sitting there with their down jackets. They'll be so cold. So what is it? Is it hot or is it cold? Well, 20 degrees, I guess if you're used to -20 or whatever, it feels really hot. But to take the analogy, like actual heat would be like 40 degrees, 50 degrees, right? So that would be like nirvana. Yeah, okay, it doesn't sound like nirvana, but yeah, bear with me. Or let's say 21 degrees, that's room temperature. That's actually usually considered to be comfortable. So then 10 degree after like a long cold winter, like probably in Russia, in some places it's even colder, much colder. So then again, 10 degrees plus is like, wow, it's so warm. And then but the 20 degrees, they're actually like nirvana. So it's not saying that this is not warm, but it could be so much better. And we're not opting for this greater happiness that our mind has the potential to experience. But you cannot experience. It's there, the potential, it's ready to experience that. But what's in the way? Root misconception. What's in the way? The resulting self-centeredness. We can never be totally at peace. We always worry about I, me, and mine in one way or another. There's always this in the back of our mind. We may have this most blissful moment, but it doesn't last. Because a moment later, it's just something not right. Just something not right. Okay. So therefore, we need to first recognize this is our predicament. And to see there's so much greater, there's something so much greater than what we have right now. We have the potential to achieve it. Well, let's aim for it. Let's aim for liberation. Without aiming for self-liberation yet, but to generate awareness of samsara. I want more. I want more. I mean, especially in the 21st century, we should have a lot more renunciation. You know, like there's like a Buddhist commercial. You could have so much more. Lasting happiness. Buy blah, or no, don't even buy it. Practice such and such. And then once you have that recognition of what's wrong with our existence and the wish to achieve that by overcoming what's in the way, you then change the focus. Yeah, but other sentient beings are just like me, trapped in samsara. And just as I want it for myself, now I want it for them. And they outnumber me. So this is just one person, one minor person. Important, yes. I'm not saying totally neglect yourself and don't aim for your own liberation. In fact, even Buddhahood is for your own benefit and for the benefit of all sentient beings. That's why we talk about a body, or an enlightened quality that benefits the Buddha and that benefits others. However, still, when it comes to great compassion, the focus is on all sentient beings. It's emphasized a lot more also in the texts, because we've fallen to the extreme of I, me, and mine so much that now we need to find more of a balance by going into the other extreme. Therefore, we hear so much about cherishing just others, cherishing others. We just need to hear that to find a balance between, yes, giving attention to our own needs, etc., but also, of course, equally to those of other sentient beings. All right. Now, having said all this, therefore, great compassion is really the focus is on others. And that is a huge step after so long cherishing ourselves. I mean, since beginningless time, that word is so mind-boggling anyway, beginningless. I mean, we're not very comfortable with like endless and beginningless, but never mind. Anyway, for a long time. And then the next step, of course, is bodhicitta. Okay. Now here it says in the commentary, in the auto commentary, having realized the suchness of one's own reality. Okay, so what does it mean, one's own reality? Having realized the suchness of one's own reality. Where's the quote? What does it mean in Tibetan? I can't find it right away. Anyway, having found, never mind, I'll follow what's here. So having realized the suchness of one's own reality, like my reality. What is reality? There's your reality, there's my reality, there's the sum of everyone's reality, and that's reality. So my own reality refers to understanding the suchness of what's going on around me, other people I perceive, myself, etc. Having realized that, one generates the mind with the thought, I will help sentient beings realize this ultimate nature of things. And this is called awakening mind. Ah, okay. So what does it tell us? First, you need to realize emptiness. And then you can generate the mind, I will help all other sentient beings to do the same. All right, there's already what? I have to realize emptiness first? Okay. This citation focuses on only one aspect. First of all, it only focuses on one aspect of the objective of the awakening mind. Okay, the objective of the awakening mind. Now, this takes us to actually another text or another topic we usually study before we study Madhyamika. It's Parchen. It's the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. Based on Maitreya's Abhisamaya Alamkara. That is, we study the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. We do that now as well. But the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, as you may remember, this huge body of teachings the Buddha gave, right? As part of the middling turning, the second turning of the wheel. First turning of the wheel is usually described as the Sutras of the Four Noble Truths. Then you have the last turning of the wheel, which includes sutras such as the Sutra Unraveling the Thought, which teaches us about interpretive and definitive teachings. It teaches about Buddha nature. But in the middle of it, the second turning of the wheel, which is usually from the point of view of time, so it's the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. And they have a hidden meaning and a direct meaning, an explicit meaning, an implicit meaning and an explicit meaning. So even the Heart Sutra has an explicit meaning and an implicit meaning. Explicitly, what does it teach? Emptiness. Implicitly, it also teaches the path. Implicitly, it teaches the path to enlightenment. That's not obvious, right? It's not obvious. Form is empty. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. That teaches the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, for instance. Yeah, it introduces us to emptiness, in other words. Yeah, I think path of preparation, yeah. Anyway, so when we study the implicit meaning of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, in other words, what does the Buddha teach? What are the meditative states we have to develop? What kind of minds do we have to, like, yeah, meditations do we have to practice? What are the different level all the way to Buddhahood? So without talking about emptiness, but just about the different consciousnesses, we study the implicit meaning of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. And we study that as part of Parchin, right? So it's a whole topic we study. It's called Parchin. And Maitreya, later after the Buddha had passed away, he kind of summarized the implicit meaning of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras in his text, Abhisamaya Alamkara, or Ornament for Clear Realizations. This is the text we studied for about 6 years, which goes through all the different steps, what you need to practice, what is Buddha nature, etc. All that is explained. And then, when you finish that topic, you study Madhyamika. That is the explicit meaning of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, right? That's the explicit meaning. All right. Now, having said that, bodhicitta is very clearly explained as part of Parchin, that first topic we study before Madhyamika, the implicit meaning of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. And bodhicitta is beautifully explained. Okay, does anyone remember? We studied this together. What does it say? What does that say? What is bodhicitta? What do you remember of bodhicitta? If you've ever studied Parchin, or if you ever studied this part. Well, there is a quote from the Abhisamaya Alamkara that's used, only 2 lines, very easy. It's kind of saying the awakening mind, for the welfare of others, to wish for completely perfect enlightenment. What is it? It's just these 2 lines. In other words, it describes 2 aspects of the enlightened mind. 2 aspects, 2 objectives. What are the 2 objectives? One has to do with great compassion, one has to do with wisdom. Pardon? Say it. Go ahead, please.
To achieve the wisdom so that you can liberate everybody else.
Achieve. The 2 objectives. Can you give them? Can you name them? Sorry, I forgot to look at the discussion group, and in between there were some. I'll mention it a little later. Sorry, Alan, go ahead. The two objectives. The awakening mind, for the welfare of others, to wish for completely perfect enlightenment.
So the objective is to reach complete enlightenment.
That's one.
For the benefit of the others, so that you can come back.
Okay, so the 2 objectives are the benefit of others. Yeah, so exactly as Alan said, the 2 objectives are the benefit of others and full enlightenment. 2 objectives. Okay, these are sometimes called branches of bodhicitta. But branch is a weird word. I mean, literally it means branch, but elements is probably a good word. So bodhicitta has 2 elements, has 2 objectives, has 2, well, I should say elements, 2 aspects. One is the benefit of all sentient beings, and one is one's own enlightenment. So they're usually described as the aspect for the benefit of others and the aspect of enlightenment. But one precedes the other. One goes first. Which one goes first? Which one goes first? Pardon? To benefit all sentient beings. Yes. That one goes first. So before you generate bodhicitta, it's a cause. Did I say it right? Did you say that? No, you didn't. Oh, okay. Okay. Never mind. All right. Oops. Sorry. That's okay. I got it. Thank you. So one is to benefit all sentient beings. That precedes bodhicitta. Remember, I talked about bodhicitta is just a means, or bodhicitta deals with bodhicitta as the wish to become enlightened. That's really what it is. But driven by great compassion. And it's a means to an end. Like, for instance, you want to heal other sentient beings. You want to be a doctor that, I don't know, is able to treat diseases that so far no one has been able to treat. For that, you have to become a doctor first. But your main goal, your main objective is to benefit people who suffer from I don't know, incurable diseases. So your goal is to find a cure. But you won't be able to do that if you don't become a doctor first or study medicine or whatever, study the kind of research that you need to do, etc. Therefore, likewise here, the main objective, so everything you do, remember when I talked about the sutra that is quoted here, that particular sutra, and I'll say a little bit more about it later, but that particular sutra, it deals with compassion. It just says compassion. Once you have great compassion as a bodhisattva, you will have all the other qualities, right? So great compassion is so important. That's why bodhicitta is not praised here. It's great compassion, right? So important. That is the aspect for the benefit of others. But then bodhicitta itself, although compassion preceded it, the element of compassion preceded it, bodhicitta is not compassion. It's not compassion. It's one of its aspects in the sense it's cause. But then the aspect that arises together with bodhicitta is the aspiration to become enlightened. In fact, bodhicitta really is that. It aspires to become enlightened. So it has two elements, one that must precede it and one that arises with it, that is part of it, aspiring to become enlightened. Very important, these two aspects. All right. So here, in this particular sutra, Lama Tsongkhapa says this citation of the sutra focuses on only one aspect of the objective of the awakening mind. So what is presented here does not complete its definition. Right? The words that I previously quoted, for the welfare of others. So for the welfare of others, it must have preceded, great compassion must have preceded bodhicitta. Now when we talk about bodhicitta, we always say to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. The main goal is to become enlightened, preceded by great compassion, which is therefore, that's why we say for the benefit of all other sentient beings. Okay. Now here, the quote that is given is only talking about one part of the definition. Okay, so it's not talking about wanting to become enlightened, it's talking about wanting to benefit other sentient beings. Okay, in that way it's not complete yet. Also, Chandakirti, he said in his auto-commentary on entering the middle way, one should definitely generate the mind with the thought, I will rescue the entire world from suffering and definitely connect them to Buddhahood. Beautiful, right? But again, it's only one aspect. Which aspect is missing? Connect them to Buddhahood. Yes. I will rescue all the world, take them to Buddhahood. But that is, which aspect is mentioned here? Which of the two aspects? Pardon? No. Bodhicitta has two aspects. One aspect for the benefit of others. One aspect, one's own enlightenment is missing. Yes. So, as I said before, the aspect for the benefit of others is based on great compassion. That is great compassion. That is the method aspect. Then the second aspect, the aspect of wishing to become enlightened, that's the wisdom aspect. So bodhicitta actually combines both method and wisdom. Method is that urge to help all sentient beings. Wisdom is how. Right? How am I going to do it? I need to become enlightened. Right? Okay, that's the wisdom aspect. Now this is missing here. So here too, he says with regard to the quote from the auto-commentary, because it does not mention awakening itself. Oneself attaining awakening, the object of one's attainment, it is only a partial definition. Therefore, the commentary clearly states, when showing how the awakening mind arises in dependence on compassion, that such a mind focuses on the object of attainment, awakening itself. It says, so in this next quote, then you have the complete awakening mind. The awakening mind aspires to perfectly attain this Buddhahood alone. Only Buddhahood, that's all you need. If you really want to benefit all other sentient beings, it's not like Buddhahood plus winning the lottery or something bizarre, right? No, it's just Buddhahood, Buddhahood alone, which is the cause from which emerges both the excellent taste of the ambrosia of sublime Dharma, characterized by the cessation of all distorted conceptualizations, and the one who embodies true friendship to all beings. So in other words, it's only Buddhahood. That is what we need. And that Buddhahood, or that aspiration to become a Buddha, the result will be the sublime Dharma. Now you embody the Dharma. As a Buddha, you become the Dharma. Every word you teach, you live. You embody everything that you teach, which is characterized by having eliminated all that can be eliminated, all the obstructions, everything in our mind that's extra. That's not in the nature of our mind. It's not in the nature of our mind. It's like mud in water. Mud in water. Right? So mud, it's not in the nature of water. You can separate H2O from the mud. So similarly, right now, our afflictions, our obstructions are not in the nature of our mind. Once we remove them, that's the state of Buddhahood. Right? So that's one aspect of having the mind of a Buddha. Being a Buddha means basically having a mind of a Buddha. You've eliminated all the distorted conceptualizations, everything that's not in the nature of our mind, and you embody the true friendship to all beings. Now you're a true friend to all sentient beings, the best friend. A Buddha is the best friend. You remember in Lama Tsongkhapa's praise, the unacquainted friend. We're not even aware of the Buddha. We haven't met the Buddha. I mean, we know of the Buddha, but I don't know whether we feel friendship towards but the Buddha towards us, whether we've met the Buddha personally or not, our best friend. Right? Yes, Alan.
Nagarjuna is a Buddha?
Pardon?
Recognized as a Buddha?
Who?
Nagarjuna.
Is Nagarjuna recognized as a Buddha?
Is he thought of as being a truly enlightened person?
I guess he's a Buddha now. I don't know. I mean, usually I think he's described, at the time when the Buddha made his prediction that he's going to come, I think he described him as an 8th ground bodhisattva. So you had a lot of time to... No, but I'm kidding. I mean, this is from the Sutric point of view. Then there's, of course, the uncommon Tantric point of view, where Nagarjuna may have been already enlightened, actually. Right? It's possible that he was already enlightened, but he manifested... So we don't know. In the end, we don't know. Officially, it's not known as a Buddha. Yeah.
If he's truly enlightened.
Okay, this is not a clarification. Can we keep it a little bit? Sorry. Let's leave because otherwise I get into discussions, I get distracted. So can we please ask later? Yeah, thank you. All right, okay. Now, having said this, in light of this, the following should be accepted as the full definition of the awakening mind. It is the wish to attain unsurpassed enlightenment, the object of attainment for the benefit of all sentient beings, its attended objective. Right? Okay, so again, as we heard before, that is complete bodhicitta, where you have both aspects. Great compassion going first, the vast aspect, and then the aspiration to become enlightened, which is part of the wisdom. But that's not saying that bodhicitta itself is the method aspect. But it's in that way combined, because aspiring to become enlightened, although that's a method, but it's based on wisdom. It's based on wisdom. Why would I aspire to become enlightened? Unless, it's not like I have no idea what enlightenment is, so let's just wish for it. That's not enough. We need to first understand what enlightenment is. So it's based on wisdom. The first aspect, the two elements, it's the vast aspect. You need to have true compassion, great compassion. The second is based on wisdom. What is emptiness? What is enlightenment? To understand what is enlightenment. Otherwise, if you wish for enlightenment, even if you're driven by great compassion, it's not going to be bodhicitta. So you may say, I wish to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings, but we need to have a sense of what enlightenment is. In fact, if you want to do it absolutely correct, first you need to realize that enlightenment is possible before you generate bodhicitta. First, you need to actually incontrovertibly understand that enlightenment exists. That's really not easy. It's not easy. But okay. You can do it with generate bodhicitta without knowing that enlightenment, without incontrovertibly realizing that enlightenment is possible. Just having deep faith based on reasoning is also okay. That would also suffice. There are two types of possibilities, two versions of disciples. Remember? Coming back from what we studied before as part of Parchin. We studied this before. There are two kinds of practitioners. Those following wisdom, in the sense like those of sharper faculty, it said, like always reasoning, always apply reasoning in the sense of like, first I want to understand this is possible. First I want to understand that enlightenment is possible before I aspire towards it. Right? That's one practitioner. And then there are the other practitioners, they use a kind of language that's at our time and age sounds not very PC, but they literally say those are dull faculties. But honestly, I'm happy to say I'm totally of dull faculties. No problem with that. No, I'm not even a practitioner, but if I were, I would definitely, and that's okay as well. But the point is, like, those of dull faculties, they are those who are like, okay, I believe it. The Buddha wouldn't lie to me. Enlightenment makes sense. That's good enough for me. I aspire to enlightenment, right? Yeah, so if I were on that, if I had great compassion, then the next step would be, of course, to want to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. But then you have the two versions. Either you know that enlightenment is possible, or it's okay, I take it on faith. Right? Not blind faith, but based on faith. Both are possible. Okay. All right. So there's a lot of explanation that needs to be given. If you studied Parchin before and you remember, then this doesn't need to be given. But in case you haven't, or even if you have, you may not remember, I think it's important to talk about this here. Because it comes up now. All right. Therefore, so the quotes we gave before, I'll say again. One is the quote from the Sutra of, what does Thupten Jinpa call it? Of perfectly gathering the teachings, or the Dharma. This quote only talks about one aspect, which is the aspect for the benefit of others, or the element of wanting to benefit others, which precedes bodhicitta. Similarly, the Auto Commentary does the same. It only mentions rescuing other sentient beings by showing them, connecting them to the ultimate truth, or connecting them to Buddhahood even. But they're missing this aspect of wanting to become enlightened yourself. That's what's missing, which is why the second quote from the Auto Commentary is given, which clearly describes bodhicitta in its complete form. The two aspects are clearly laid out. Okay, this is how this mind is defined in the explanation of the commentary as well. In Jayananda's commentary, we mentioned Jayananda, this Mahayana scholar, or no, I shouldn't say Mahayana, this Nalanda scholar, Madhyamika scholar, not Mahayana, Madhyamika scholar, which is excellent. It's also described in that text. There's thus no divergence, there's no actual difference with respect to defining bodhicitta, the awakening mind, between Chandrakirti's tradition and the one presented in Ornament for Clear Realization, or Ornament of Realizations, which is Abhisamaya Alamkara. Okay? Therefore, you have here Chandrakirti talking about bodhicitta, and you have Maitreya in his Ornament for Realizations, or Ornament for Clear Realizations, very extensively describing bodhicitta. Remember? The awakened mind, for the benefit of all sentient beings, to wish for perfect, complete enlightenment. These lines. And based on these two lines, you have long explanations and lots of commentaries. Now, when you hear about bodhicitta, the enlightened mind, whenever it's explained, it's usually based on Abhisamaya Alamkara. That is Maitreya's text, Ornament for Clear Realizations, which of course is a commentary on the implicit meaning of the Perfectional Wisdom Sutras. It's what we study when we study Parchin. But even Chandrakirti, he mentions it, and Lama Tsongkhapa says, well, there's no contradiction between Chandrakirti's explanation here, that is, well, he really just mentions this mind, but in his entering the middle way, and in the auto commentary he explains it exactly like Maitreya does. Okay. All right, so this is for bodhicitta. Bodhicitta, I hope, is clear. I'm a little worried that I confuse you too much with everything I'm saying. For some of you, you've heard this before. For some of you, it's new. But basically, you just need to remember these two aspects. One precedes bodhicitta, one is part of bodhicitta. Understanding these three factors, now the text goes back to understanding these three factors, compassion, non-dual awareness, and awakening mind as being a cause or being the cause of the bodhisattva, is the tradition of the Precious Garland, which states the following. All right. I keep looking at the messages. I'll go through them in a moment once we start the questions. I missed them before, my apologies. If one aspires for oneself and for the world to attain the unexcelled enlightenment, the roots of that enlightenment, of this, are an awakening mind as firm as mirror, king of mountains, compassion extending in all directions, and gnosis not rooted in duality. I gave that quote before. Chandrakirti supplements, of course, his text with quotes such as this from the Precious Garland, from Nagarjuna's Precious Garland, describing these three factors. Now there's a debate. There's a problem with these three factors. They're the cause of enlightenment. Okay, cause of enlightenment is okay. It's okay. We can live with that, right? These three, the mind realizing emptiness, great compassion, bodhicitta, they're the cause of enlightenment. Okay, because here it says, if one aspires to oneself and for the world, for oneself and the world, for oneself as well, and for the world to attain enlightenment, the roots of this enlightenment are, and then the three are described. But, and it says here, although this citation presents these to be the roots of awakening or of enlightenment, and does not explicitly state these to be the roots of bodhisattvas, the causes of bodhisattvas, the word root has the connotation, does not explicitly state this, the word root has the connotation of being first. And furthermore, since the context here is the presentation of the three principal causes of that first stage, from its context, one can infer that these three are the principal causes of bodhisattvas. So I'll say it again. In that quote, it just talks about these three being the root of enlightenment. But the root means that which comes first. So first, in the sense, even before you're a bodhisattva, you must have these three. And what are we talking about here? We're talking about what are the causes of bodhisattvas. As part of the root text, that the compassionate mind and non-dual cognition, as well as the awakening mind, these are the causes of bodhisattvas. Now, we're obviously talking about what is a cause of a bodhisattva. Therefore, to kind of say, yeah, those three are a cause of enlightenment, but not of a bodhisattva, to avoid a debate, is just not an option. Okay. All right, so, but now we have a problem. Now we have a problem. The demonstration of these three factors as being the cause of bodhisattvas in entering the middle way, Chandrakirti obviously said these three are the cause of bodhisattvas, takes place in the context of asking if Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas are born from the Buddhas and the Buddhas are born from the bodhisattvas, from where do bodhisattvas arise? Well, from where do bodhisattvas take birth? Given this, such causes cannot be understood in terms of the explanatory cause of the bodhisattva. Rather, they must be understood as the bodhisattva's producing cause. All right, that's a new term here. Explanatory cause, producing cause, an explanatory. An explanatory cause is not really a cause. An explanatory cause. It hardly comes up in English. You may miss it. Even in Tibetan, it's a term that's not used a lot. But it's not that difficult. It's just explaining the characteristics of something. An explanatory cause is really just the characteristics of a phenomenon. So it's not literally a cause that must precede that thing, right? So let's go back to seed and sprout. The seed is the cause of the sprout. What is the explanatory cause of the sprout? The sprout is green, it's got a little, I don't know, little branch here and there, it's got a root. That would be the explanatory cause, if you like. I mean, you wouldn't use that word ordinarily, but those are the characteristics of the sprout. What is the producing, the cause that produced the sprout? It's the actual cause, it's the seed. Right? So in the literature, in the Buddhist literature, like I said, we have to get used to some of the weird jargon, like explanatory cause. So explanatory cause basically means, don't want to swallow that fly. Explanatory cause basically means the characteristics of bodhicitta. Okay, so if we say those three are a characteristic of a bodhisattva, for instance, sorry, not the explanatory cause of a bodhicitta, but the explanatory cause of a bodhisattva realizes emptiness, has great compassion, has the awakening mind, or bodhicitta. Fine. But we're talking about a producing cause, an actual cause, something that gives rise to a bodhisattva, right? Okay. So, in other words, a bodhisattva must realize emptiness, and because the bodhisattva has, if the mind realizing emptiness is a cause of a bodhisattva, first you realize emptiness and then you become a bodhisattva. That's implied. A cause always precedes its result. So in other words, before you become a bodhisattva, first you need to realize emptiness. First you need to have great compassion. First you need to have the awakening mind. Okay, great compassion is fine. Before you can become a bodhisattva, you must have great compassion. Okay, that's fine. Tick. Okay. But you have to realize emptiness? Huh? You don't, right? You don't have to realize emptiness. If you are a practitioner of sharp faculty, then yes. But you can also be a practitioner of dull faculty. I'm good with dull faculty as long as I am a practitioner. Okay. So you don't have to. And what's the problem saying a bodhisattva must first generate the awakening mind and then they become a bodhisattva? What's the problem with that? Or is there a problem? Yes? Are you thinking? What's the problem? If we say bodhicitta is the cause of a bodhisattva, what's the problem? Is there a problem? No problem? Bodhicitta is the cause of a bodhisattva? Pardon? Contrived bodhicitta. Ah, okay, but actual bodhicitta. What's the problem if we say, she said contrived bodhicitta, but what about actual bodhicitta, which is uncontrived bodhicitta? It's uncontrived bodhicitta, actual bodhicitta. What's the problem if we say bodhicitta is the cause of a bodhisattva? What's the problem?
Well, it couldn't be the cause because it would have to precede.
Yes, it couldn't be the cause because it would have to precede the bodhisattva. But if you have bodhicitta, actual bodhicitta, you are by definition a bodhisattva. Right? Aiden, what did you want to say?
It's not a person.
Pardon?
It's not a person.
No, that's true, but it can still be a cause of a bodhisattva. So to be a... Pardon?
The Sharakas became bodhisattvas. Well, the bodhisattvas became Buddhists because they were people.
Okay, so Aiden said, well, bodhicitta is not a person. So how could it be a cause of a bodhisattva? Because previously we talked about persons. So Pratyeka Buddhas and hearers and solitary realizers were caused by another person, a Buddha. A Buddha was caused by a person, a bodhisattva, and suddenly we have those three, the non-persons. Yeah, but I don't think there's a rule, it has to always be a person in here. I think it's just pointing at, all this four spiritual beings, the four kind of, beings like hearers, solitary realizers, bodhisattvas, and Buddhas. It shows their relationship in terms of who causes whom and what is their root. It comes down to bodhicitta, the awakening mind, and the mind realizing emptiness. Of these three, of which those three, the compassionate mind is the root. the actual root of everything. It'll come in the next verse. It'll become clear in the next verse. Okay, but anyway, to go back to what I was just saying. Oh, so bodhicitta, as Venerable said, what's your name? Pema. As Venerable Pema said, so therefore the bodhicitta cannot be the cause of a bodhisattva because it doesn't precede a bodhisattva. The moment you have bodhicitta, you are a bodhisattva. Yes,
So, if,
clarification.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's clarification.
yeah.
So if the bodhicitta is the cause, it has to cease.
It's like a seed.
It's like a seed, and it
Yes.
has to cease at the moment that it arises.
So if it's the seed of something, at the time of the seed, you don't have the
You
effect.
don't have to.
Yeah, and that's a problem.
They cannot be at the same time.
They cannot be at the same time, exactly. So you have a bodhisattva who's without bodhicitta. First you have bodhicitta and then you have a bodhisattva. That wouldn't make sense, right? So bodhicitta is the defining characteristic of a bodhisattva. If you have uncontrived bodhicitta, as Venerable Pema said, uncontrived, like actual bodhicitta, not like fake version, like, oh, I want to be enlightened for the benefit of, like as we kind of fake it until we make it, kind of do it before class, for instance. So therefore, having that kind of bodhicitta, once you have that kind of mind, you call a bodhisattva. If you're a bodhisattva, you have that kind of bodhicitta, which means a bodhisattva is defined by that mind. You want to know whether someone can be called a bodhisattva or not? It doesn't matter what they look like. It doesn't matter whether, I don't know, they have a quick temper or not. It's all dependent on do they have bodhicitta or not. Right? And from then onwards, all their actions are informed, are influenced by their aspiration to become enlightened. When they walk up a flight of stairs, since they have bodhicitta, it becomes a practice of a bodhisattva. It becomes a bodhisattva practice. They brush their teeth, it becomes a practice of a bodhisattva. This mind has become so powerful that all their actions are influenced by it. Which is why you have great lamas like Lama Zopa Rinpoche, unfortunately late Lama Zopa Rinpoche, saying, generate bodhicitta, and then whenever, and he advises us, since we don't have uncontrived bodhicitta yet, to generate it every time to just generate it in your mind. It's for us it's not sufficient. It doesn't lie dormant. For a bodhisattva, it lies dormant. So all the actions of a bodhisattva are informed, are influenced by bodhicitta. And all their actions become meaningful. For us, since it doesn't lie dormant, it comes and goes, it's helpful to generate it again and again. You brush your teeth for the benefit of all sentient beings. You go to the bathroom for the benefit of all sentient beings. I mean, to remember it all the time. And that is still contrived, but it can turn into the real deal. Right? Yeah. So it's such an effective practice in mindfulness, with mindfulness and bodhicitta combined. You open a cupboard for the benefit of all sentient beings. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche would say, I open the cupboard of enlightenment, or I walk down these steps to take out sentient beings from the hell realms. I mean, that's not what you're actually doing, but your brain, your mind doesn't know that. It's just the power of the mind. You can manipulate it in such a way that it becomes a cause. I mean, in a positive way, although you're not actually doing that, that's not your intention while you're walking down, but you can transform it into a very powerful practice. However, once you become a bodhisattva, it's there. It's lying dormant and it's influencing everything you do. It's a very powerful state of mind that now, like I said, informs all your actions or influences all your actions, and they become a practice of a bodhisattva. Although they're not described as Buddhist practice as such, like when you just think about making tea, it's not a path to enlightenment, but it's still, you accumulate a lot of virtue which supports your practice, right? Well, that's debatable. Do they not? Are all their minds virtues? That would be something you could debate. That would make all their minds virtues, even the mind that wants to make tea. All right, so that's not virtues in itself, but it could still, I don't know. It's a little debatable, but nevertheless, it doesn't contradict what I said earlier. It lies dormant, and definitely all your practices, for sure, all your practices become a cause for your enlightenment. Okay. So, going back to the text now, there's a question. Is the bodhisattva, for whom these three factors are taken to be the causes, at the very least, a bodhisattva who's on the initial stage of having entered the path? Are we talking about here a bodhisattva who's a new bodhisattva or an old bodhisattva? Why that distinction? Because of the debate that I just mentioned. An old bodhisattva, you could say, okay, an advanced, I'm not saying old like in terms of being an older person, but I'm saying an advanced bodhisattva. An advanced bodhisattva, you could say, okay, the initial bodhicitta, the initial actual bodhicitta, that is a cause of the advanced bodhisattva, right? So when I say the three, realizing emptiness, great compassion, and the awakening mind. There's no debate about great compassion, but the awakening mind is a little controversial simply because a bodhisattva is not preceded by the awakening mind. But if you were to say, okay, here bodhicitta is referring to new bodhicitta. For the first time you generated bodhicitta, right? For the first time you generated the mind of enlightenment. Now, if you're an advanced bodhisattva, then that initial bodhicitta becomes a cause of the advanced bodhisattva. That works, right? So to give you another example, going to school is not a cause for a pupil. Obviously, because it's not like you go to school first and then you become a pupil. So when you go to school, you are a pupil. That is the characteristic of a pupil. But the first class, going to first class, is a cause of a fourth grade pupil. Then it makes sense. So to go to school and attend first grade is the cause of a more advanced pupil. Similarly here, someone is saying, are you talking about a new bodhisattva? So the awakening mind, bodhicitta, is a cause of a new bodhisattva? Well, then you have a problem, because they are not preceded by bodhicitta. If you talk about an advanced bodhisattva, okay, then you can say that initial mind, all right. So here, he's basically saying, is the bodhisattva for whom these three factors are taken to be the causes, at the very least a bodhisattva who's on the initial stage of having entered the path? If so, then it's not correct to say the Mahayana awakening mind is his cause. Why? Because the moment such a mind is attained, the person is already by definition a bodhisattva. So if you're talking about a new bodhisattva, it doesn't work. Similarly, positing the wisdom or the gnosis that does not tend toward any of the two extremes, so the mind that realizes emptiness, as a cause of a bodhisattva is also untenable. Doesn't make sense, because not every bodhisattva realizes emptiness. So if that's a cause, you become a bodhisattva already realizing emptiness. That wouldn't work. Because bodhisattvas first generate the conventional awakening mind. First they generate what we call bodhicitta, and then subsequently engage in the practice of the six perfections. And only the sixth perfection is wisdom. That's their argument. They're saying, okay, first you generate bodhicitta, then you practice generosity, ethical conduct. I'm not saying this is our own view. This is a question. Someone is challenging Chandakirti. Someone is challenging, basically Chandakirti, saying, you have to realize emptiness to become a bodhisattva, and you must first have bodhicitta, and then you become a bodhisattva? Neither of them work. Because bodhisattvas first generate the awakening mind, and then start practicing the sixth perfection, and wisdom is only number 6. So first you generate generosity, then Okay. Anyway, I want to take some questions because time is up. But you see how the debate develops here? Yeah? Is it obvious is it clear how okay. Now I'll give you, the answer is right on the next page, by the way. All right. No, I'm not going to tell you the answer. The answer is not that difficult. It's explained on the next page. But the writing is difficult. You have to really keep on your toes. The writing is not that easy. So first of all, your homework is to figure out the answer to those two. Okay, why? What is meant here? What is meant here with a bodhisattva being preceded by the awakening mind, which is its cause? What does that mean? And what does it mean that the bodhisattva is preceded by the realization of emptiness? I've kind of answered both of them. No. The second I've answered about realizing emptiness. But still, if you read, it's good to read in advance. And I also want you to tell me when it says reply, it says, since the exact faults you have leveled above will ensue, we do not accept the second option, but describe to the first. What is the first and what is the second option? What are the first and the second option? You have to really read carefully. A lot of these texts are written not in a way that is necessarily easy. I mean, this is actually relatively easy. The wordings, it's a little bit not convoluted, but sometimes the sentences are quite long and it's a little bit difficult to follow. There are texts that are much more difficult to understand. And it's a practice in itself to read them with concentration, to not lose the topic. It's a practice in concentration and a practice in also understanding. It trains your mind. So you have to go back. What is the first option? What is the second option? See whether you can figure out. If you read it 3 or 4 times, I'm pretty sure you'll find what the options are. And you get a little bit used to the style of writing, right? Make your mind more flexible to reading these kind of texts. All right, homework number 1. What is meant with a bodhisattva's cause is the awakening mind and the realization of emptiness. What is really meant here? Second homework, what is the first option? What is the next option? And I'll just choose one of you. No, I'm kidding. You kidding.
What's the second homework?
The second homework is, in the text it says reply. After the question, it says reply. Since the exact faults you have leveled above will ensue, we do not accept the second option, but subscribe to the first. We do not accept the second. So what's the second option? What's the first option? Do you have the text?
Yes.
It's at home. Yeah. Well, just look for page. Well, in the Kindle version, it's page 54. That means it's probably in whichever version you have, either page 59 or page 44. And then you have like first option and second option. So what are these options? Right, figure that out. Great. Okay. I hope it wasn't too overwhelming. I was going to do much more, but can you still follow? Is it still? Yeah, I hope it takes some time to just make your mind more flexible to some of these ideas and the way of thinking, etc. But it's not that hard, and you know, a few more times and it becomes really easy or relatively easy to read this text. But quickly I want to go through the texts I received. Banu said something about thingness. He said being an inherently existent entity as opposed to a phenomenon arising from dependent or through dependent origination. Yes, that's true. So being an inherently existent thing as opposed to being merely labeled, being dependent on labeling, being dependent on its parts, being dependent on endless other things other than itself, right? I'm saying endless, because endless particles that you can endlessly divide, etc. Yeah, so absolutely I agree with him. Then B says non-duality of subject and object you described seem to be not so much the merging of subject and object, but the subject and object dropping off and only object is left. Yes, it's not a merging, she's right. It seems to that mind that subject and object merge, but they don't literally merge. And also Aiden has this question, are they still subject and object? And yes, it's just a sense to that mind as if they were merging. It's just a sense that the mind has without them literally merging, of course. Yeah, so it's kind of like the subject falls away And there's just awareness of the object. In that way, I think B puts it nicely. And then Banu asks, are these questions now? Page 44 of the text. Lei Peng says page 44 of the text. Yes. That's the PDF. And Banu says, is great compassion exclusive of the self? That is to say, for the benefit of all sentient beings or the benefit of all other sentient beings? Aha. Oh, great compassion. Is it for the benefit of all sentient beings or all other sentient beings? Like, eyes out. Oops. Sorry. Thank you. Eyes gone. This is the end. What do you think? All sentient or other sentient beings. All sentient beings. What is usually the wording? What is the wording that is usually in the text? Does it say for the benefit of all other sentient beings or for the benefit of all sentient beings? It does say all sentient beings. But interestingly, when it's explained, it always talks about others. Right? Others, others, others. It's not like, but don't forget yourself. No one needs to remind us. No one needs to remind us, don't forget yourself. Because we're so good at not forgetting ourselves. Right? Remember in the beginning what I said about balance. Buddhist practice is a lot about balancing. How do you balance on a balance beam? When you fall to one extreme, how can you balance? How can you find the balance in the middle? You have to first go to another extreme. There are many examples like that. For instance, I give you another example. When you study Vaibhashika and Sautrantika, they do talk about there's no self-sufficient I, etc. But what they also teach us is that there's this objective world. Yeah, they're in agreement with our own mind that believes there's this objective world out there, and we just step into this room, for instance, to see what everyone else sees. Are you aware of your sense of objectivity? What I find very interesting, and I mentioned this before, we have a saying that goes, beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder. It's a very, very wise saying, because it's basically saying beauty is subjective. And still, we look at someone's curtains and think, oh, they got a horrible taste. Oh gosh, they're so off with it. I mean, how could they put these curtains up? They really don't know what's beautiful, right? So you see, deep within, there's a sense, there's an objective beauty. And if you don't accord with that beauty, you just have a bad taste. So say hello to your own sense of objectivity, right? It's good to connect with it at first. We're not really aware of it. But the fact that we think, it's so funny when I, like, in the West sometimes, and someone, especially like relatives, one relative in particular, I don't think she's listening. Well, she's my sister, okay. She's not listening. When she says, oh, how do you like this? And I say, I don't like it. She's offended. She's always offended. And I keep saying to her, but beauty lies in the eye. Ugh. And still she's offended. So it's like there's a sense there is an inherent beauty, an objective beauty over there. And if I don't find it beautiful, I'm being offensive. But again, I catch myself thinking, oh, how can I dress like that? Oh, but that doesn't go together, or whatever, right? Or you know, how can they, whatever, put their hair like, whatever. I have these thoughts thinking, oh, that looks gross, or whatever. And that shows I have a sense there's an objective reality. Now, Vaibhashika and Sautrantika totally support that. They support that. They do negate the I, a certain type of I, yes. They're already preparing our mind for that. But on the other hand, they're putting us at rest. Oh, there's an objective world. And then comes mind only. Nothing out there. Nothing out there, only mind. There's no person out there, there's no body out there. These bodies are just appearances to our own mind. Yes, there are other beings, but there's no outside world, right? It's like whatever, the Matrix, what have you, whatever analogies are used, like the movie, for instance. So that's from one extreme to that extreme, right? So your mind is now trained to think in a totally different way. And when you study the text, for instance, as part of our studies that we do, it's extremely intense. Purposely, there's very little time left for anything non-dharmic. So you become a Chittamatra person. You dream Chittamatra, you eat Chittamatra, you think Chittamatra, you wake up in the middle of the night and you're debating, whatever. It's so intense. Especially, especially in the beginning, even more so, because we still need to get used to these ideas. But it's done on purpose. So you really start thinking like a Chittamatra person. It becomes part of your life, which is great. Because it makes your mind flexible to think in a different way. And secondly, it kind of takes you out from that sense, this objective world. It puts more the focus on the mind so that you find a balance where it tells you, yeah, the mind is extremely important, but there's still an external world. Phenomena don't exist objectively, but externally. So, oops, now I need to make those two work. You see how pedagogically it takes you from one extreme to another to find a middle way, literally the Madhyamika or middle way school, to follow that which tells us both are possible. No objective world, but still external existence. And the mind being extremely important. Now you do the same. This is in terms of wisdom. In terms of method, it's I, me, and mine since beginning this time. Right? Now, great compassion should focus also on the I, but since our focus on the I is in the way, it's helpful to then think others. Right? So all sentient beings is the correct definition, but in your own practice, it's better to focus on all sentient because we're already fallen to one extreme, which is our obsession with the I, our addiction to the I, our obsession with the I. So now we need to balance it out, focusing more on others. But to recognize, of course, the I is equally important to all other sentient beings. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense. If from my perspective, the I is not important at all, and all other sentient beings are more important, well, if from your perspective, your own I wouldn't be important, but my I would be important as part of all other sentient beings. So it makes us equal again, right? So logically that doesn't make sense. In any way, we're a sentient being. It's important. But again, as I say, it goes to such an extent that we even meditate on bodhicitta, on the 3 types of bodhicitta, of which only one type of bodhicitta is realistic. What are the 3 types of bodhicitta? Fairy-like bodhicitta, shepherd-like bodhicitta, and king-like bodhicitta. So, fairy, shepherd, and king. Fairy-like is like you aspire to become enlightened by taking everyone with you to enlightenment. You all arrive at enlightenment together. The other one is shepherd. The shepherd goes behind the flock, goes behind the sheep. So you generate the mind that wishes to become enlightened after you've taken everyone else to enlightenment first. And then king-like is, the king walks first, so king-like is you become enlightened first and then take everyone else to enlightenment. Which one is realistic? Shepherd, fairy, or king? King! King! You can't lead all other sentient beings to enlightenment, neither of them first, nor simultaneously, unless you know how to get there. But it's very good for the mind. I'll be the last one. Especially when we feel like, oh, I want to be enlightened. When it's kind of like, oh, I feel so happy and so good as a Buddha and everyone is prostrating towards, and me prostrating to me. So at that time, when we realize, oh, the self-centered mind has now very easily creeped into our practice, as it does so well, right? I mean, that self-centered mind, you will always be part of your practice, especially in the beginning. So you trick it. You want to become enlightened, you go last. You take everyone first and you go last. So you actually working, of course, in the back of your mind, you know it's not realistic, but you generate it nevertheless. And it's a powerful force against this other mind, the self-centered mind, right? That lies dormant, but it's still influencing all your actions, right? All our actions are very much, even if there's no self-centeredness active, thinking I, me, and mine, it influences all our actions. And so a powerful force is this mind thinking, I be the last to go, right? Even though it's not realistic. So therefore, a lot of practices are done just to create this balance, to get out of that obsession with the self. Okay, great. Therefore, it's for the benefit of all sentient beings. That's the correct definition, but it's good to think for all other sentient beings, especially if you're aware of your own self-obsession, like, does it need that or not? And with more mindfulness, we'll become aware of that. That's a good question, yeah. Maud says, it always comes back to the same question. How can we be convinced enlightenment is the best way to help all sentient beings? Yeah, where we are considering what the previous Buddhas are able to do for us. Oh, what were they able to do for us, the previous Buddhas? Not that much, I'm still in samsara. Could be that sense, right? Or are they helping us in the best way now? If last one, why is there anything else needed to be done from the side of helping at least? It's one big problem we have. We have to do it all ourselves. The Buddhas can just guide us, but we still have to walk. Right? It's like a doctor can tell us which medicine to take, and guess what? We still have to take the medicine. Tell us to exercise. Yeah, I mean, it can give you hours on explanation to do exercise. We still have to do it ourselves. We're not going to move our limbs to exercise, so we could just lay back. Yeah. But it's a good question Maud is asking. Maud is saying, how do we know? Yes. So, what is enlightenment, first of all? Without understanding enlightenment, we cannot know whether that's the best way to help others. It doesn't make sense. No. Sometimes, because it's so theoretical, it's so like, yeah, enlightenment, you can do this, you can do that, and it's like, yeah, but in the back of your mind, is that even possible? I think then it's important to focus on the lamas. The effect his holiness has on other people. It's crazy. I mean, crazy in the sense like my stepma, years ago, 2014, his holiness came to Germany, and I asked for an audience because I was there at the time. His holiness taught in Hamburg, and my father's in a wheelchair. He has been since 2000. He had a stroke, can no longer talk and walk. And so I asked, especially for my dad, because he can no longer come here. And his wife is anti-religion. Yeah, I mean, it's a generation after the war, you know, like anything wearing the same hairdress, the same uniform, you know, it's associated with Nazis and so forth. I think it's like a whole generation, like being very suspicious of everyone having the same haircut and the same. Anyway, she's not for religion. And not for Buddhism, for sure. Certainly not Buddhism. And we had an audience with his holiness. My mom was there, my stepma, and my dad. And she was in tears. She could not, she was like overwhelmed by his holiness. I watched the video, I have this incredible video. Someone happened to take a video, and I see her in tears. That is the power of his holiness. I can talk about anything you want about Buddhism, nothing would convince her. His holiness takes her hand, that's the end of it. That's the end of it. That is true power. Like I'm saying, that's true power. It moves me just talking about the incredible power His Holiness has. Unbelievable. Just the other day I talked to you about my mom was here and she had an audience with His Holiness and she was never that moved. And suddenly she's in tears. His Holiness did like that on her cheek and she comes out like, what just happened? Why am I crying? This is so weird. Something was touched in her. Something, she didn't want to leave McLeodganj. Wow. This is a woman who's attended lots of teachings, who never thought this is the right thing. And there's His Holiness, just that much. Then, right, you get a sense how the power of someone like His Holiness, the great compassion, the wisdom, the power can turn people in a way that seems magical, right? It's not magical. I'm sure there's a scientific reason behind it, just science hasn't dealt with it yet. But the thing is, that's convincing. Being in the presence of these beings, it sounds like omniscient. Yeah, right, knows everything, knows how many insects there are in the world. Well, that's not what omniscience means. It knows what exactly you need in that moment and do it, right? Look at someone in a way that throws them off their feet and opens them to the Dharma. But unfortunately, that's just the first taste. That's like when you go to a supermarket and you get a piece of cheese to taste. You still have to buy the cheese, right? You get a little piece, you get a piece, just get a taste of it. Something is stirred inside you. And then it goes away. It's just a memory. And you have to do all the work yourself. That's why we're still not enlightened. Because in my case, definitely, my self-obsession is much stronger than any Buddha. Yeah, and the Buddha guide us, the Buddhas teach us, they tell me again and again. And my self-obsessed mind is just doing its thing. Right? That's why it's difficult. Oh, my mom's calling. Never mind. Call it back later. Okay, great. Anyway, your questions are great. Oh, Maud has another question. Well, unless you have a question, please go ahead. If you have a question.
I always had this question about
Oh, you had an earlier question, and Ellen had an earlier question. Go ahead, yeah.
the Chittamatra, like I always fall like, okay, their belief is kind of nihilism because if nothing exists outside, then what makes things appear? Then I can posit tree here where there is no tree, but tree should have a cross. It appears a tree.
Yes.
So how they deal with this?
So your question is, so the Chittamatra school, don't they fall into the extreme of nihilism? Because how do they account for the appearance of phenomena? Things can still appear, but if there's no external world, what makes them appear? Now, let me ask you a question. What is responsible for the appearances in your dreams? When things appear in your dream, for instance, there are no flying cows, so it's not like you watch flying cows all day long and you dream about them. No, you have a dream about a flying cow. Where does that come from? From the mind. What caused the appearance of the flying cows? An imprint in the mind. So this is how the Chittamatra school explains it. They're like imprints ripening in the mind. And one thing that I learned from my teachers who taught us Uma, for instance, one teacher in particular, great Geshe from Drepung, he used to say, we never move away from the Chittamatra school as much as we may initially think. So, although the Chittamatra school says there is external existence, the Vajrayabhika school says phenomena exist externally, but they still say that's a conventional existence and phenomena appear to our mind due to imprints. Which is why when I see water, a preta being sees pus and blood, and a celestial being sees something else. See? So the reason, why do we perceive a world? Does a fly perceive what we perceive when they fly into this room? No. Or a dog or a cat? No, because we have different imprints. We have a different, physical constitution. But not just that, in each moment, also different imprints ripen. So I have very different experience from you, right? Different experiences. I feel good, I don't feel good. I look at something, it tastes incredible or it tastes disgusting. It's all to do with the different karmic imprints I've accumulated. So that's very similar to Chittamatra. Very similar. So as he said, don't expect to move away from the Chittamatra school to the extent that you may think in the beginning. The importance of the mind, yes, external existence, but what? I mean, just think modern science. Thank you so much to modern science. We live at a day and age where we have a lot of challenges, but modern science is so helpful in understanding. For instance, these are just subtle particles. These are just little atoms. And still they appear to me in a certain way. Right? So the fact that what I see, colors, No, it's just light waves, right? They're just different light waves. So when I see yellow, yellow is not actually out there. Whoa, makes me feel like dizzy. Huh? This beautiful yellow over there, or blue or whatever, doesn't exist out there. That sounds very much like mind only. And science supports that. They still say there's an external world, but not the way it appears to us. Well, what's out there then? Right? That's the question. Yeah, it's not easy. You know, there's nothing there, there's something there, there's nothing there, there's something, right? It'll be like very difficult to find a middle way. And science adds an extra difficulty to it, but it also helps us better because we believe in science more than we believe in Buddhism. Let's face it, initially at least, right? Initially, it's like a guy with a fancy PhD tells you that we're more willing to believe that as opposed to what Sono says or the Buddha says. But bringing the two together, that's what's important. Take whatever science tells us about the external, for instance, about the atoms, about colors, what are sounds, and compare it to your own experience. Not just on an intellectual level, on an emotional level. Wow, what am I actually perceiving? It's not out there. Then it really can give you a sense that this objective perception, no, it's not there. It's fascinating, isn't it? It's incredible. All right. Okay, Maud had another question, but in the meantime, he deleted it. So maybe if there are more questions, well, keep them coming. I really like this discussion group, and no pressure. If you have something to discuss, do it. If not, it doesn't matter. But I'd like to follow it, and it also helps me just in class to address certain things. Okay, great. A little bit late. All right, let's now dedicate whatever positive potential we've accumulated here together. May it, of course, become an important cause for all of us to generate the awakening mind, the realization of emptiness, as well as bodhicitta, to eventually, for the benefit of each and every sentient being, attain the enlightened state of a Buddha. And in the meantime, may it, of course, cause our great masters, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all the other embodiments of the Dharma, to have extremely long lives, to be healthy and continue to guide us through their examples and their words. And may our positive actions, our positive potential also have a positive impact on the people around us, so that their fears, their loneliness, and their stress, that it may be reduced and they find more inner peace. So with this in mind, let's recite the dedication prayers. In the snow-encircled land, you are the source of benefit and bliss. Avalokiteshvara Denzin Gyatso, please remain in life until samsara ends. The brave Manjushri and also Samantabhadra realize things as they are. Hence, in order to be able to follow their example, I dedicate these merits in the best way. With the dedication praised as supreme by the victorious ones of the 3 times, I completely dedicate all these roots of virtue so that I might engage in the noble bodhisattva deeds. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. All right, thank you. Sorry, went on really long today.